Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Olivier Leblanc, and the title of today's presentation is What to Do When There Is No History, Predicting Demand Recovery Under Covid-19 Pandemic. Joining me today are Cindy Yao, Gurpreet Cheema, and Yiqin Song. The structure of the presentation revolves around answering the questions that came to us since the beginning of this crisis. So as March came around and we were only starting to understand the magnitude of this crisis, the first question that came to us was, what is going on exactly? We presume that everyone in the audience experienced the same feeling we did, which was that there is no playbook for this. It's never happened before, or at least it's never happened at a time when data is readily available like it is today. We then turn around to ask ourselves, what should we do if we want to know what future demand might look like? This then turns to the focus of today. What did we do? We'll walk you through how our thinking process evolves along the way and how we were able to quickly produce realistic scenarios on demand recovery. Finally, we'll say a few words on what our plan for the new normal is. Even though traditional revenue management and network planning forecasting systems have been very successful and robust in the past few years, they were not designed for such a crisis. Typically, the main and often only input that feeds these systems are booking observations, current and historical. And with these inputs in hand, future demand is forecasted at very granular levels, and predictions are fed into network optimization process that generates recommendations on schedule, capacity, pricing, and inventory. This forms the basis of an airline commercial strategy and is what our days were made of prior to the pandemic. But then, demand suddenly dropped to never observed levels, with cancellation rates sometimes higher than booking rates because of travel restrictions. But more worrying, it was very unclear how and when the demand recovery would materialize. With that being said, it was critical to navigate through this high uncertainty and gain insights on what the recovery would look like. This led to the creation of a demand recovery task force, which had as its main objective to develop realistic demand forecast model in order to allow for early alignment of the commercial response. This task force was a combined effort between revenue management, customer analytics, the AI team, and many others from network planning and sales. And these outputs would then ultimately be used to help guide capacity decision, help calibrate revenue management system, and inform the rest of the commercial branch. We are now more than 6 months into the pandemic, and it's easy to forget, given what we know today, how unclear the situation was when it began. So when we were tasked with developing forecast models for the recovery, our first instinct was to take a deep look at previous crises that affected this industry in the past. The SARS crisis and the financial crisis were obvious candidates. While we learned a lot, it became clear very quickly that we needed more information, which led us to start monitoring and analyzing a number of different data sources that we don't typically look at under normal times in the revenue management world. COVID cases, travel restrictions, web searches, mobility indexes, to name a few. And with that in hand, we started developing what we call our heuristic-based model, which makes a number of assumptions around necessary elements that need to happen for the recovery to progress, as well as on potential customer behavior to get baseline forecasts. As the quality of the data improved, and booking started trickling in, we leveraged our AI team to help in building machine learning models to enhance baseline predictions and replace short-term ones. And that's where we are today, but we also have a few things planned for when we return to the new normal.
We'll now walk you through the heuristic model, which is based on the customer segment to allow fast reaction to the pandemic. So our goal of this baseline model is to be able to predict the percentage change in demand versus 2019 level by the future travel months. And to be able to understand the future demand, we break this down into 4 key questions by studying the past events like SARS and financial crisis. And the first question being, when will recovery start? So for this, we are tracking the COVID cases closely and develop a model called SERRD to give us the flexibility around countries we'd like to monitor and the update frequency that we need. Also, we are tracking the travel restrictions around the world and the customer sentiment of traveling. And the second question is, where do we start? We adjusted our current bookings and removed those who booked earlier and won't be able to travel anymore due to the current restrictions. And now the third question becomes, once the recovery starts, how fast and slow it will be? So we look at the SARS and financial crisis recovery profiles and also gathering feedbacks from our business and the whole commercial branch to get their insights as well. And we monitor the traditional signals like the bookings and search trends, but also looking at signals that we don't traditionally monitoring, like the COVID cases and the economic projections, other countries' recovery profiles. And the last question is, will there be some temporary variations from the general trend, for example, the holiday and special events, and second waves as some of the countries are experiencing now, and pent-up demand since the country has been closed for long, and outliers. So now we set up the simple framework. It didn't take us long to realize that the demand recovery will be different by customer segment. So we worked with our CRM team to identify business and leisure bookings in our current bookings, and also worked with our RM communities to set up the segment recovery profiles. For example, for VFR, since they are more resilient to the entry restrictions and the quarantine requirements, this means an early start and a relative fast ramp up for this segment. And for business, it will also start early given the current essential worker movements, but very slowly due to the travel advisories and also the current corporate policies. And in the long term, it will be impacted by the economic conditions and also the potential behavioral change as people are more comfortable working from home now. And the recovery will vary by the region where the business is and also industry. For leisure and group, it will be a slow recovery post-pandemic phase since these are not necessary travel, and even slower for the group segments given the additional social distancing measures in place. And both segments, they will return to the new normal after vaccine rollout. And the recovery rate is different by distance, by age group, and also the destination type, whether it's a more outdoor activities destination or it's indoor museum visiting. So now we answer the 4 key questions that we previously set up for each of the segments. We then aggregate to market to network, and a potential output of the product is below at the bottom right, which is by travel date and percentage change versus 2019. We have the realistic scenario and also the uncertainty bound around it for each of the market. And we do the calibration every 2 weeks by monitoring the signals. So how does this compare to our reality and what's our forecast accuracy? So we develop a tool for our RM practitioners to track the whole life of the flight by booking date and also the bookings velocities to be able to answer the questions, are the expectations based on our signals realized in our actual bookings? And if not, do we wait and see, or we should adjust the forecast right away, and by how much? So for the forecast accuracy, we track each time our forecast after the recalibration to be able to see how this evolves with time. And this concludes the heuristic model part, and now pass on to our colleagues on the AI team.
We integrated the science-based models to enhance the process built with the heuristic models. The AI models focus on automating the manual steps accomplished during the first phase and use machine learning to enhance the short-term predictions. So we designed a 2-phased approach for that. The focus of the first phase was to identify search and booking outliers as signals to see the start of recovery. The buildup of positive outliers signals the team to identify and be prepared for the recovering markets. After identifying the markets where demand was recovering faster, The second phase was to predict short-term booking behavior using data from various sources. Due to the fluid nature of the market, it was extremely crucial to build a robust model by quantifying the current trends in bookings. The model performance was regularly monitored in order to further tune and improve the model. Moving on to the outlier detection. The goal of the first phase was to spot markets where we start to see some ray of hope and positive trends in searches and bookings. Looking at the recent trends, we forecasted the future by building forecasting models with a range of confidence. We flagged the outliers as anything outside that range of confidence. The early demand recovery signals were then used in dashboards and reports that were flexible for the team needs. The RM practitioners then used these summary reports to quickly see and identify which markets are performing well. The outlier dashboard helped users to see the results at different levels and in different departure windows as needed. They would then drill down into specific markets and develop strategies to prepare for the incoming demand. After seeing more and more outliers surfacing from our data, suggesting the recovery of certain markets, next we wanted to answer the question, where do the trends go from here?
So the goal of the second phase of the machine learning approach aims at complementing the heuristic model for short-term predictions. And what's really special about this approach is that the model integrates signals from both conventional and non-conventional signals. These generally fall into 6 categories. The first one being COVID cases as predicted by SEIRD model. This model differs from conventional epidemiology model so that it is a multi-phase model and considers exposed and disease states in addition to the conventional susceptible, infected, and recovered states. We have model predictions for 52 countries. The second signal is historical and current booking information. We place more emphasis on the current year after observing very different booking behavior compared to normal times. And by placing more weights on current year, we can better capture these rapidly changing market demands. Third, the model considers economic indicators such as GDP per capita and many other factors to help us understand how the macroeconomics are changing during this pandemic. The fourth signal we consider is seasonality trends of booking behavior, which allows us to understand how our customers booking previously and where are the valleys and peaks of each market. Booking behavior from departure months that have been closed have also been included for that are essential for reflecting customers' behavior during the pandemic, such as booking closer to departure date. And last but not least, we have regular inputs from our RM practitioners, which we then incorporate into the model for continuous improvement. So the end result of this effort is a variety of tools and dashboards for our demand managers and other RM practitioners. The dashboard using SEIRD model results allow us to quickly look up the number of new, confirmed, and active cases for over 50 destinations as we quickly pivot through the dynamic planning of demand recovery. The machine learning model gives RM practitioners access to predicted bookings for close and departure month on a weekly basis. From there, demand managers can then use the different scenarios to help guide their decision-making and strategic planning. The accuracy tracker allows RM practitioners to track the evolution of the model performance for departure months that have been closed. And this information can be used as a guide when looking at prospective departure months. And finally, the creation of a signal dashboard acts as a quick pulse check to see recent trends with regards to booking, searches, health, and Google Trends.
As the recovery progresses in the coming months and we slowly reach the new normal, it's important not to forget what we've learned during these hard times. While we take a step-by-step approach to let our RM systems gradually return to normal, it will be important to integrate all the learnings from customer segmentation and the usage of non-traditional signals into our RM daily decision-making. Also, retaining and expanding the AI models for long-term planning is another example of how we plan to manage the new normal. On the positive side, this crisis has stimulated the energy of a motivated team and led us to collaborate with more agility, to innovate, automate, and mine new datasets. All these revealed quite insightful, broadened the scope of revenue management, and will definitely be carried over. This concludes the journey of the work that was accomplished throughout the pandemic so far. We hope you found this presentation insightful. Merci. Thank you.